The golden sun stretched its arms across the vast green fields, bathing the land in a warm, comforting glow. A gentle breeze rustled through the tall grass, carrying with it the whispers of the earth. The cows of Green Pasture Valley grazed peacefully, their tails swishing away the occasional fly, unaware that something or someone was watching them from the shadows of the dense jungle that bordered their home. Among the herd, 4 cows stood out. Balaram, the eldest and wisest, Madhav, the strongest, Gauri, the gentlest, and Chandra, the youngest and most playful. They had lived together for years, forming a bond that was deeper than blood. The valley was their home, a place where they felt safe under the watchful eyes of their shepherd, an old man named Hari, who had taken care of them since they were calves. But the jungle held secrets that the cows did not know, and among its dark thickets lurked a pair of piercing yellow eyes. The tiger had come. It had been a dry season, and food was becoming scarce in the depths of the forest. The rivers had shrunk to mere trickles, and the once abundant deer and wild boars had moved farther away in search of water. The tiger, lean and desperate, had turned its gaze to the valley, where the cows roamed freely. For days, it had been watching, waiting, learning their movements. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Balaram lifted his head and sniffed the air. A strange scent lingered, something unfamiliar, yet oddly unsettling. His ears twitched as he scanned the edge of the jungle, but all he saw were the trees swaying in the wind. "Did you hear that?" Gauri asked, her voice soft with worry. Madhav looked up from his grazing. "Hear what?" "Something moving in the bushes," Chandra whispered, her eyes wide with curiosity. Balaram remained still for a moment longer before shaking his head. "It's nothing. The wind, perhaps." But deep inside, he wasn't sure. As night fell, the herd gathered near the old banyan tree, their usual resting place. Hari had already left for his small hut at the far end of the valley, confident that his beloved cows were safe. After all, no predator had ever dared enter Green Pasture Valley before. Yet, as the stars twinkled overhead, the yellow eyes in the darkness remained fixed on the unsuspecting herd. The tiger was patient, and it knew that hunger was the greatest motivator. And so it waited. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The cows gathered under the great banyan tree, their stomachs full from the day's grazing. As usual, Bhima stood at the edge of the herd, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Chatura, the wisest among them, listened carefully to the sounds of the forest, while Gauri and Suraj played with the younger calves, keeping them close. But deep within the dense jungle, hidden in the shadows, the tiger sat silently, his golden eyes gleaming in the darkness. His name was Raktava, feared by all creatures of the forest. He had waited patiently for many moons, watching the herd, learning their habits. He knew that the cows were strong together, but he also knew that unity was fragile. It could be broken with the right trick. Raktava curled his tail and let out a low growl. "I cannot fight them all," he muttered to himself. "But if I can turn them against one another, they will fall one by one." The whisper of doubt. The next morning, as the cows spread out across the meadow to graze, Raktava crept close to the edge of the field. Hidden behind thick bushes, he watched them carefully. His sharp eyes locked onto one cow, a young and restless bull named Viru. Viru was different from the others. He was strong but impatient, always questioning the rules of the herd. He often wandered close to the forest despite the warnings of the elders. The tiger's lips curled into a sly smile. "He will be my key," he thought. That evening, as the cows rested, Raktava moved closer to the meadow's edge and called out softly, "Viru, Viru." Viru's ears twitched. He lifted his head, looking around. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice cautious. "I am a friend," the tiger whispered, his voice smooth like honey. "I have watched you, Viru. You are strong, brave. Different from the others." Viru stepped forward, his curiosity growing. "Why are you speaking to me?" The tiger chuckled. Because I see your true strength. The others hold you back. They make you follow rules, but you are meant for greater things. Why should you obey them? Do they not fear your power? Viru frowned. The herd keeps us safe. That's why we stay together. The tiger sighed dramatically. Safe or trapped? Tell me, Viru. Do you not wish to explore the world beyond this boring meadow? To taste the sweetest grass untouched by others? To be free? Viru hesitated. The tiger's words stirred something inside him. He had always wondered what lay beyond the meadow. The old cows always spoke of danger, but what if they were wrong? What if there was more to life? Seeing the doubt in Viru's eyes, the tiger continued, You don't have to listen to me, but ask yourself, are you truly free? Or are you just another cow in the herd, forced to follow their rules? Viru did not reply. He turned and walked back to the herd, but his mind was restless. The tiger's words echoed in his ears. The first crack in unity. The next morning, Viru was different. He grazed away from the others, lost in thought. Bhima noticed and walked over. Viru, why are you alone? I just need space, Viru said, his voice tense. Chithura, always observant, sensed something was wrong. Did something happen? Viru hesitated, then shook his head. No, nothing. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The tiger had done his work well. The first crack in the herd's unity had begun to form. From the shadows of the jungle, Raktava watched with a satisfied grin. It has begun, he murmured, his eyes glinting with hunger. The days passed, but the meadow was no longer the same. A shadow loomed over the herd, not one cast by the setting sun, but by fear and doubt. Ever since Lullet had vanished, the cows had grown uneasy. Their unity, once their greatest strength, had begun to crack. Small disagreements turned into whispered arguments. Some cows blamed the elders for not acting sooner. Others, like Viru, questioned whether they should always follow the rules of the herd. Viru had changed the most. He no longer listened to Bhima's warnings, nor did he graze beside Suraj or play with the younger calves. He often stood alone, staring at the edge of the meadow, his mind clouded with thoughts he had never dared to think before. Are you truly free? Or are you just another cow in the herd, forced to follow their rules? The tiger's words echoed in his heart like a song he could not forget, a dangerous curiosity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, the herd gathered beneath the great banyan tree, preparing for rest. The elders spoke in hushed tones, worried about the tiger. But Viru did not listen. He had already made his decision. The forest is dangerous, they always said. But what if they were wrong? Tonight, he would find out for himself. As the stars blinked into the sky, Viru quietly slipped away from the herd. The cool night air carried the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. The trees at the forest's edge stood tall and unmoving, their dark branches reaching toward the sky like frozen flames. With a deep breath, Viru took his first step inside. The world changed instantly. The soft grass of the meadow was replaced by rough roots and dry leaves that crackled under his hooves. The air smelled different, heavier, wilder. Fireflies flickered in the darkness, their tiny lights like scattered stars. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. Then, from the shadows, a voice slithered through the air. So, you finally came? Viru's heart pounded. He turned sharply, his breath caught in his throat. Two glowing amber eyes stared at him from the darkness. A shape moved, silent, powerful. The tiger stepped forward, his golden fur shimmered under the moonlight, his black stripes blending into the night. He was larger than Viru had imagined, his muscles rippling beneath his sleek coat. Yet there was no anger in his eyes, only amusement. You, Viru gasped, taking a step back. The tiger smiled. I knew you would come. Viru swallowed hard, his body tensed, ready to run. But something in the tiger's voice held him still. I am not afraid of you, Viru said, though his voice wavered. Raktava chuckled, his tail flicking lazily. Of course not. Why should you be? I have never harmed you. Viru hesitated. That was true. The tiger had attacked Lullet, but not him. Not yet. You were right about one thing, the tiger continued smoothly. You do not belong in the herd. You are stronger, smarter. You think for yourself. Unlike the others who follow the old cows blindly. Viru frowned. The herd keeps us safe. The tiger tilted his head. Does it? His voice was calm, almost kind. Lullet followed the herd. Did that keep him safe? A cold shiver ran down Viru's spine. He did not answer. The tiger stepped closer, his voice soft like a whispering breeze. You don't have to live by their rules. I can show you a different way. A better way. Viru's ears twitched. What do you mean? The tiger's eyes gleamed. Come with me, just for a little while. See the world beyond the meadow. Eat the sweetest grass. Drink from the purest rivers. Feel what it's like to be free. Viru hesitated. He glanced back toward the meadow, where his family slept, unaware of the danger lurking in the forest. The tiger noticed. They won't even know you're gone, he said smoothly. You'll return before dawn. Viru's heart raced. The meadow had always been his home, but for the first time it felt small. The forest stretched before him, dark and mysterious. What if he's right? What if there is more? He took a deep breath, and then, against everything he had ever been taught, he nodded. I'll go with you. The forest of shadows. The tiger's smile widened, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned and padded deeper into the forest. Viru followed. The trees grew denser, their twisted roots snaking across the ground. Strange sounds echoed through the air. The rustling of unseen creatures, the distant howl of a wolf. The deeper they went, the darker it became. For a while, Viru tried to keep track of their path, but soon everything looked the same. The meadow felt like a distant memory. We're far now, Viru murmured, a tinge of nervousness creeping into his voice. The tiger glanced back. Afraid? No, Viru lied. The tiger chuckled. Good. Then let me show you something. They entered a small clearing, where moonlight streamed through the trees. At its center lay a crystal-clear pond, its surface reflecting the stars above. Thick, green grass surrounded it, untouched and inviting. Viru's eyes widened. This is beautiful. The tiger sat beside him, his tail curling around his paws. This is just the beginning, he said. There is so much more. Viru bent down to take a sip from the water. It was cool and refreshing, better than the stream in the meadow. Maybe he was right, Viru thought. Maybe there is more to the world than the herd. The tiger watched him, his eyes unreadable. Stay with me, Viru, he said suddenly. Viru looked up, startled. What? Stay, the tiger repeated. The herd will never accept you now. They will call you a traitor for leaving. But with me, you will be strong. You will be free. A lump formed in Viru's throat. He had not thought about that. Would the herd truly reject him? Would Bhima, Chathura, Gauri, and Suraj turn their backs on him? I need to think, he mumbled. The tiger's eyes darkened for a brief moment, but then he smiled again. Of course. Take your time. Viru lay down beside the pond, his mind spinning. He thought of his home, of the calves playing in the sun, of the elders teaching the young ones. But he also thought of the freedom the tiger had shown him. His eyes grew heavy. Slowly, he drifted into sleep. The tiger watched him, his expression unreadable. Then, without a sound, he stood and disappeared into the shadows. Tonight, the trap had been set, and soon the herd would crumble. The first light of dawn crept through the trees, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The meadow was quiet, except for the occasional rustling of leaves as a gentle breeze passed through. The herd was beginning to stir, stretching their legs and greeting the morning with low, peaceful moves. But something was wrong. Bhima's sharp eyes scanned the herd, and his heart clenched. Viru was missing. The herd's fear. Chatura, who had been awake for some time, noticed Bhima's worried expression. She stepped forward. "What is it?" "Viru is not here," Bhima said, his voice tense. The other cows turned their heads, their peaceful morning now clouded with worry. Gauri and Suraj looked at each other, their ears twitching with unease. "He must have wandered off," Suraj suggested, but even he didn't sound convinced. Bhima's jaw tightened. He had seen the change in Viru over the past few days. He had watched as doubt and restlessness took hold of the young bull. He knew that Viru had been questioning the herd's rules, and he knew where Viru had likely gone. The forest, Bhima whispered. A chill ran through the herd. The forest was a place of shadows and danger. The tiger lurked there. Viru's return. Just as panic was about to spread, a rustling noise came from the trees. The cows turned sharply, their bodies tensed. Then, stepping out of the forest, Viru appeared. His fur was covered in dust and leaves, his eyes filled with exhaustion. But there was something else, a hesitation in his step, as if he wasn't sure he belonged in the herd anymore. "Viru!" Gauri ran to him. "Where have you been?" Viru hesitated before answering. I went into the forest." Gasps rippled through the herd. Some of the younger cows took a step back, as if Viru had returned as something different. Chatura narrowed her eyes. "You broke the rule. You went into the tiger's land." "I had to," Viru shot back. His voice was filled with frustration. "I had to see if we were really living in fear for no reason." Bhima stepped forward. "And what did you find?" Viru opened his mouth, but stopped. He couldn't tell them everything. He couldn't tell them that he had followed the tiger willingly, that he had been tempted by the taste of freedom, by the idea of power. But he also couldn't ignore the feeling that had settled deep in his bones, the feeling that he had been played. "The tiger didn't attack me," Viru finally said. "He spoke to me." The herd stiffened. Chatura's voice was sharp. "And what did he say?" Viru looked around at the faces staring at him. They were waiting for him to explain himself, to justify his actions. But the truth was, he wasn't sure if he could. "He told me we are weak," Viru admitted, "that we live our lives in fear when we could be strong." Silence. Then Bhima stepped forward, his powerful form towering over Viru. But his voice was not filled with anger. It was filled with sadness. "And do you believe him?" Viru hesitated. The tiger's words still echoed in his mind. But so did the warmth of the herd, the comfort of knowing that he was part of something greater than himself. "I don't know," Viru admitted. Bhima sighed. "The tiger does not tell the truth, Viru. He only tells the parts of the truth that serve him." Viru looked up. "Then tell me, Bhima, are we truly free?" Bhima did not answer right away. Instead, he looked at the herd, at the frightened eyes of the younger calves, at the worried faces of the elders. "No," Bhima finally said. "We are not free, but we are safe. And sometimes, safety is worth more than freedom." Viru clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't ignore the truth in Bhima's words. Then, before anyone could say more, a terrible sound ripped through the air. A roar. The tiger strikes. The cows turned toward the forest, their bodies frozen in fear. The sound of snapping branches echoed through the air. Birds erupted from the treetops, fleeing into the sky. Then, out of the shadows, the tiger emerged. Ratava, his golden eyes glowed with hunger. His powerful muscles rippled beneath his striped coat as he stepped forward, his tail flicking lazily. The herd backed away, their hooves trembling against the ground. "You see," Ratava purred, his deep voice carrying over the terrified herd. "You are not free. You are prisoners of your own fear." Bhima lowered his head, stepping protectively in front of the younger cows. "Stay together," he said in a low voice. But Viru did not move. He stood frozen, staring at the tiger. This was the moment of truth. Had the tiger been his friend? Had his words meant anything? Raktava turned his gaze toward Viru. His lips curled into a knowing smile. "You belong with me, Viru," the tiger said. "Not with them." Gasps spread through the herd. The words were like a knife, cutting into the fragile trust they still had in Viru. Bhima's voice was sharp. "Viru, come back to us." Viru's heart pounded. He had been so sure that the tiger was offering him something better. But now, as he looked at Raktava, he saw the truth. This was no friend. This was a hunter, and he was the prey. With a deep breath, Viru turned away from the tiger and stepped back toward the herd. "I was wrong," he said, his voice firm. "The herd is my home." Raktava's golden eyes narrowed. His smile faded. "So be it," he growled. Then, without warning, the tiger lunged. The herd screamed. The calves ran toward the center of the group. Bhima and the strongest bulls charged forward, their hooves thundering against the earth. The battle had begun, and this time the herd would fight. The ground trembled beneath the weight of the charging bulls. Dust rose into the air as hooves pounded the earth, and for the first time in years, the herd did not run in fear. They fought. The clash. Raktava lunged forward, his claws slicing through the air. Bhima met him head-on, his massive horns aiming for the tiger's side. The two collided with a force that sent shockwaves through the meadow. The tiger twisted at the last moment, dodging the full impact, but Bhima's strength still sent him stumbling. The herd moved as one. The strongest bulls, Chathura, and even the young Suraj formed a defensive wall around the calves and weaker members. Gauri stood firm, her eyes blazing with determination. "Hold the line," she shouted. Viru stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. This was a moment. Would he fight for the herd he had doubted, or would he let the tiger's words hold him back? Raktava recovered swiftly. His amber eyes burned with rage. He had expected fear. He had expected chaos. Instead, the herd stood united. "Foolish cows," he snarled. "You cannot defeat me." He leapt toward Bhima again, his powerful claws aimed at the bull's throat. But this time, Bhima was ready. He lowered his head and met the tiger's attack with a powerful swing of his horns. The impact sent the tiger rolling across the ground. The herd roared. Yes, roared. Not in the way a tiger does, but in their own way. Their hooves striking the ground, their voices joining together in a deep, unified bellow that echoed through the valley. Vera's choice. Vera's breath caught in his throat. This was not the weak, fearful herd the tiger had described. This was not a group of helpless creatures waiting for their doom. They were fighting, and they were fighting together. The tiger had lied. Raktava rose to his feet, shaking off the dust. His golden eyes locked onto Viru. "Do you see now, Viru?" the tiger said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "You are not one of them. You hesitate. You do not belong." Viru clenched his jaw. He had followed the tiger because he wanted to be free. But freedom was not found in the shadows of a deceiver. Freedom was standing with those who cared for you. And Viru knew where he belonged. With a deep breath, he lowered his head and charged. Straight at the tiger. The turning point. Raktava's eyes widened in surprise. Viru struck him from the side, throwing his full weight into the attack. The tiger stumbled, his claws scraping against the ground as he tried to regain his footing. Bhima and Chathura saw their chance. They moved in together, striking the tiger from both sides. Raktava let out a furious roar, but he was outnumbered. For the first time, he was the one in danger. The herd, once his prey, had become his enemy. A deep growl rumbled in the tiger's throat, his muscles tense, ready for another attack. But as he glanced around, he saw what had changed. The herd had found its strength. Raktava flicked his tail and took a slow step backward. "You have made your choice, Viru," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "But remember this, I am patient. I will return. And next time, you may not be so lucky." With that, The tiger turned and slunk back into the forest, his golden eyes vanishing into the shadows. The aftermath, the silence that followed, was deafening. The herd stood still, their bodies heaving with exhaustion. Then, slowly, one by one, they turned to Viru. He expected anger. He expected them to cast him out. Instead, Bhima stepped forward and placed his forehead against Viru's. "Welcome home," he said. A lump formed in Viru's throat. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Chatura gave him a firm nod. "You found your way back. That's what matters." Gauri smiled. "And you fought well." Suraj nudged him playfully. "That was almost as impressive as my kick." Laughter rippled through the herd, light and warm, chasing away the fear that had once gripped them. A new dawn. As the sun rose higher, its golden rays washed over the meadow, chasing away the last traces of the night. The tiger was gone, for now. But the herd knew the truth. He would return one day. And when he did, they would be ready, not as frightened prey, but as a family, as one. Viru lifted his head, gazing across the meadow he had once thought of leaving. Now, he saw it for what it truly was. Not a cage, a home, and he would fight for it. The meadow was peaceful again, but the air still carried the weight of what had happened. The herd had won, not just against the tiger, but against their own fears. Yet, as they stood together, exhaustion settling into their bones, they knew their battle was not truly over. The wounds of war. Bhima limped slightly as he moved toward the watering hole. Though his body was strong, the fight had taken its toll. Gauri noticed the way he winced when he stepped on his front leg. "You're hurt," she said, her eyes filled with concern. "It's nothing," Bhima replied, but his voice betrayed the pain he was trying to hide. Chatura stepped closer. "We fought well, but we must recover. The tiger may be gone, but the forest will always hide new threats." The herd murmured in agreement. Some of the younger calves still trembled, staying close to their mothers. Even the strongest bulls bore scratches from the battle. Viru lowered his head. I never should have left. I almost brought danger to us all." Bhima looked at him, his eyes gentle. It was not you who brought the danger, Viru. The tiger has always been there. You simply saw him for what he was." Chatura nodded. "And you fought with us when it mattered." The young bull felt warmth spread through him. He had doubted them, doubted himself, but now he understood. True strength was not about standing alone. It was about standing together. A lesson in unity. As the days stretched on, the herd began tending to their wounded. The older cows licked the scratches of the younger ones, their gentle care soothing the aches of battle. Even Bhima allowed Gauri to press cool mud against his sore leg, though he grumbled about it. Suraj, ever the playful one, trotted over to Viru. "You know, for someone who thought the tiger was his friend, you hit him pretty hard." Viru snorted. "Yeah, well, I realized my real friends were here." Suraj grinned. About time. The mood in the herd lightened. Though they had fought a terrible battle, they had gained something far greater: trust. The return of an old threat. As night fell, the herd gathered close. The younger calves huddled near their mothers, their fear from the tiger's attack still fresh in their minds. The stars blinked above them, peaceful and eternal. But Viru couldn't shake a feeling of unease. He wasn't the only one. Bhima stood near the edge of the meadow, his sharp eyes scanning the tree line. Chatura soon joined him. "He will return," she said softly. Bhima nodded. "Yes, but when he does, we will be ready." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Then, from deep within the trees, a low growl echoed. Not loud enough for the younger cows to hear, but Bhima and Chatura heard it, and so did Viru. The tiger was watching, waiting. A test of patience had begun, preparing for the future. The next morning, Bhima gathered the herd. "We won a great battle," he said, his voice strong. But we must not become careless. The tiger is still out there. Chathura stepped forward. For too long, we have only run when danger comes. That changes now. We will learn to defend ourselves. Not just when the tiger attacks, but before he even thinks of striking. The herd listened closely. Suraj tilted his head. But how? We are not like the tiger. We do not have claws. No, Gauri said, but we have each other, and that is stronger than any claw. Viru felt a fire awaken in his chest. He had once questioned their way of life, but now he wanted to help protect it. I'll train with you, he said. I'll learn to fight, not just for myself, but for all of us. Bhima gave a proud nod. Then let's begin. And so the herd trained, a new way to fight. At first, it was strange. They had always relied on their numbers to survive, but now they had to think differently. Bhima led them in practicing strong, unified charges. The bulls learned to form a protective circle around the weaker members. Chathura taught them how to use their hooves to kick, how to move in patterns that confuse predators. Even the younger calves learned how to react quickly, to move as one with the herd rather than scattering in fear. And Viru? He trained the hardest of all. Day after day, he practiced alongside Bhima, pushing himself to be stronger, to be faster. He had once been tempted by the tiger's promise of power. Now, he found his strength in something real, his family, his herd. The tiger's watchful eyes. Weeks passed, and the herd grew stronger. The wounds from the last battle healed, and in their place, a new resilience formed. But in the depths of the forest, the tiger still waited. Raktava had seen the change. He had watched from the shadows as the herd trained, as they grew more confident. They were no longer the same helpless prey. But Raktava was patient. He licked his lips, his golden eyes gleaming in the darkness. Their fear is fading, he murmured to himself. I will have to remind them why they should fear me. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He had waited before, and he could wait again, because the hunt was never over. The days passed, and the herd thrived. No longer did they live in constant fear, always looking over their shoulders, waiting for the tiger's attack. They had grown stronger, more united. They had turned their fear into power. But deep in the forest, the tiger was waiting, watching, planning. Raktava had not forgotten his defeat. He had not forgotten how the herd had stood against him, and he had not forgotten Vira's betrayal. Tonight, he would remind them why they had once feared him. The storm approaches. The air was thick with tension. Though the meadow was calm, the animals sensed something was coming. The birds were silent. The wind whispered through the trees in hushed warnings. Even the sky had darkened, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Bhima stood at the edge of the meadow, his ears twitching. Chathura stood beside him. He's coming, she murmured. Bhima nodded. I know. Viru, standing nearby, overheard their conversation, his muscles tense. Then we fight. Bhima turned to the young bull, studying him carefully. There was no hesitation in Viru's eyes. He had come a long way from the doubtful, restless bull who had once questioned the herd's ways. Yes, Bhima said firmly. We fight. The tigers return. As the moon rose high into the sky, the first sign of danger appeared. A single, deep roar echoed through the valley. The herd stirred, eyes widening in fear. Mothers pulled their calves close. The younger bulls pawed at the ground, their ears flicking nervously. Then came the sound of rustling leaves, the snapping of twigs. The tiger was here. Raktava stepped into the moonlight, his golden eyes gleaming like fire. He was larger than the last time they had seen him, his muscles rippling with power. But more than that, he radiated a quiet, dangerous confidence. The herd had grown stronger, but so had he. I see you've been training, Raktava said smoothly, his tail flicking. Impressive. Bhima stepped forward. lowering his horns. "We will not run this time." The tiger let out a low, rumbling laugh. "No, I don't expect you to." He crouched low, his body coiling like a spring. "Let's see if your training was enough. The battle begins." With a ferocious roar, Raktava lunged. But this time, the herd was ready. Bhima and the strongest bulls met him head-on, their massive bodies forming a wall of muscle and power. The tiger swiped his claws, but they dodged, striking back with their horns. Chathura led the second line, keeping the calves and weaker cows safe. She directed them, ensuring that if any of them were attacked, they would move as one. And Viru fought like never before. He had trained for this moment. He knew the tiger's tricks. When Raktava turned to swipe at Gauri, Viru struck him from the side, sending him stumbling. The tiger growled, his tail lashing in frustration. This was not the weak, helpless herd he had once terrorized. They were warriors now, a battle of wits. Raktava knew brute force alone wouldn't be enough. He had to break them, and he knew exactly how. He locked eyes with Viru and smiled. "You're strong now," the tiger said. "Stronger than them. You don't need them anymore." Viru stiffened. "Think, Viru," Raktava continued. "You trained harder than all of them. You fought harder. You are the one who'll defeat me, not them." The herd faltered. Some turned toward Viru, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. Raktava saw his opportunity. "They will always see you as the one who betrayed them," he whispered. "They don't trust you, but I do. You could be my equal." For a brief moment, everything slowed. Viru could feel the weight of the tiger's words pressing down on him. But then he looked at Bhima, at Chithura, at the calves they had all sworn to protect. And he knew the truth. The tiger wasn't offering him power. He was trying to divide them. Viru took a deep breath and stepped forward. "You're wrong, Raktava." The tiger's eyes narrowed. "Oh, I am strong," Viru said, lowering his head, "because I fight for them." And with that, he charged. The herd followed. The end of the tiger's reign. The force of their combined attack was unstoppable. Bhima struck first, his powerful horns catching Raktava in the ribs. The tiger roared in pain. Chathura followed, kicking him with her strong legs. Gauri and the others surrounded him, giving him no room to escape. Viru delivered the final blow, ramming into the tiger with all his strength. Raktava stumbled back, breathing heavily. Blood dripped from his wounds. For the first time, true fear flickered in his golden eyes. He had lost. Slowly, painfully, the tiger rose to his feet. He glared at the herd, his tail flicking. "This is not over," he growled. Bhima stepped forward. "Yes, it is." The herd stomped their hooves, their voices rising together in a deep, powerful bellow. The message was clear. Raktava did not belong here anymore. The tiger let out one final snarl, then turned and slunk back into the forest. He did not look back. A new dawn. As the sun rose over the meadow, the herd stood victorious. They had not only survived, they had won. They were no longer just a herd. They were a force, a family. Viru looked around at his brothers and sisters, his heart swelling with pride. "I was wrong before," he said softly. "Being strong isn't about standing alone. It's about standing together." Bhima nodded. "And together, we will always be stronger." The herd moved as one, stepping into the light of a new day. And though the shadows of the forest would always remain, they were no longer afraid, because they had learned the greatest truth of all. The strength of the herd is not in its numbers, but in its unity.